Good evening, everyone. As she said, my name's David Rose, and I'm honored to be here tonight. They invited me because of the work I've done over the years working on crime. But for me, what's important are the victims. And that's been my whole focus, is trying to help families in their worst possible time and giving them a voice and trying to help the detectives get tips. That has become even harder these days because of the challenges that a lot of the detectives face. But I know for a fact they're working hard. What's sad is that we have a lot of these juvenile homicides, these horrendous acts of violence that have gone unsolved. Conrad Asa Holland is in my mind all the time because of what happened to him. Amari is in my mind all the time because of what happened to him. And so I think talking about the solutions is good. Things have gotten better, and I think you're going to hear that today, but it doesn't mean that when you have a double murder at a bus stop in Rainier Beach that we shouldn't all be terrified and concerned about that. And so that's what we're here to talk about tonight. It's a conversation. I think we're going to get a lot of answers. And we have an esteemed panel of guests here that I'd like to introduce. And I'm going to start just going down the row here. And this is our King County Prosecutor Leesa Manion. Mr. Paul Patu from Urban Family, who did a really nice job on our news yesterday talking about a little preview of this, and Captain Heidi Tuttle from the South Precinct. So I just want to start a little bit of a get to know you for those who aren't familiar. I didn't want to read a bio, but Leesa, tell us a little bit about your background and why you love being our prosecutor.
Well, thank you for that great question. So I was elected to serve as King County Prosecuting Attorney in November of 2022. I took office in January of 2023. I am a career prosecutor. I started in the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office as a Rule 9 legal intern after my second year of law school. I worked in the civil division for about 4 years, litigating road and landslide cases. I served as our Deputy Chief of Staff for 7 years and the Chief of Staff for 15 years. And the reason I really enjoy being the King County Prosecutor is I have the opportunity and the responsibility to make a difference in all parts of King County every single day.
Thank you. And she'll also be talking about some of the challenges her office has faced and some of their successes tonight. Now, Paul's been doing great work in the community for how many years now with these kids?
Oh, too many.
Too many years. Yeah.
But 25 plus years.
Yeah. And would you say that the work is more challenging now than ever before, or you're seeing a brighter future ahead?
Well, it's a loaded question. But I think I see both. There are some things that give you pause, like the two young men that lost their lives at a bus stop in broad daylight in front of an elementary school. If that doesn't give you pause, I don't know what would, right? But then we also have graduates of students that started down the wrong pathway, and they're graduating, and we have generations of young people that are, one is getting ready to be a principal in the Seattle Public Schools. That used to be part of our programs. That kind of tells you how old I am. When you say career prosecutor, I'm a career mentor. And so I've been mentoring kids for many years. My lovely wife and I were husband and wife team, and our heart is for young people. We're former youth pastors, and so kind of look at this as our flock and our mission. So
yeah, and those are the cases you don't hear about on the news, the successes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you. Captain Tuttle, how about your career in law enforcement?
Well, I have the best job in the world. I just want you all to know that. Is this on? Thanks. Check. Okay, good. Here we go. I started in police work back in 1996. This is my 29th year. It has gone so quickly, I can't even tell you, and I still love coming to work every single day. In fact, my oldest child is testing right now, so he has his test next weekend, so I'm excited to have him join. Thanks. If it helps, I made one for fire too. My other son, my other son's a firefighter, and he actually is in my precinct, so I get to see him quite often. It's wonderful. I came into this work because I originally had my degree in marketing and wanted to go make $1 million and make all this money. And then I just realized all I wanted to do was be a really good mom. and work with the community. And so I completely switched paths after I graduated from UW. And this was the only department I tested for, and I got in, and it's just been the best thing ever. So I'm really blessed because I am the captain of South Precinct, and that's exactly where I started. So it's full circle, and I hope they never move me.
Well, I got an alert today about a new program that Seattle Police are going to be doing and meeting with the community to talk about safety of kids. Can you tell us a little bit about that program? I think the first meeting is coming up on the 11th.
Which meeting are you referencing? I'm sorry.
It's the Safe City.
Yes. So we did that originally we did that in South Precinct,
Okay.
and it was extremely successful. The first one, we brought all the community together. They were allowed to, they got the opportunity to tell us what their concerns were, what they loved about the community, what they wanted to see in the future. And then we had a follow-up meeting, and we were able to demonstrate all the things that we had taken from the information and what we had implemented. So it's an opportunity now. We started in South, and it's going to be going through all the other precincts. So we'll be
Okay.
able to hear from the community.
All right, here's a tough journalism question. What can you tell us about the double homicide there in front of the elementary school? And are you getting close to making an arrest?
I can't speak on that. There is a lieutenant here who will speak to it later and give us some more information on the investigation. Right now, all I know is that they are working so hard in collaboration with the community to try and find the suspect, make an arrest. But right now, what we're doing is honoring these two young men's lives by working incredibly hard to improve things, not only for the kids, for the families, but also the relationships between the people that are there to make everyone safe.
Okay, thank you. And one of the challenges I talked about is how easy it is for these kids to get guns and the lack of accountability. Leesa, you pushed for a change in the law, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, I know 2 years ago, to try to get some accountability for kids who are caught with guns. How many times does it take for a juvenile to be arrested with a gun before there are any repercussions?
Well, juveniles, it's unlawful for juveniles to carry firearms, whether it's in their home, in their car, at school, on the street. And under our current law, it takes 5 convictions of unlawful possession of a firearm before juveniles are eligible for sanctions greater than 30 days at our state juvenile rehabilitation center. I have, for 2 years in a row now, pushed to change that so that young people can be eligible for JR services after the 3rd conviction. And that's not because I'm trying to lock up juveniles. It's not because I'm trying to fill our local detention center or our state facility. It's because it is scary when young people have firearms, and we want to make sure that we change their behavior. Last year when I was asked this question, we had 7 young people who were facing charges as adults for homicide, assault ones with firearms. Every single one of those juveniles had a previous unlawful possession of a firearm. So we really have to get young people to stop carrying firearms.
Let's repeat that. They can be caught the first time, they don't even get 30 days in jail. Again, second time, 35 times before, at the most, they're going to do 180 days. Nobody wants to see kids locked up, but what kind of message is that sending to those in the community? And are they being told by older gang members or older people that nothing's going to happen, and so are they being directed, do you think, to commit some of these crimes?
I don't have any evidence that young people are being directed in that way, but I do think that it tells young people that it's not serious behavior or that it is okay. And I also think that we have the ability, we know that juveniles are ripe for rehabilitation. We know that we can change their behavior with meaningful intervention. So let's offer that sooner rather than later.
Okay. Well, we just had a 16-year-old that your office just charged for shooting into a Pizza Mart in Capitol Hill, trying to shoot a security guard who threw him out because he was too inebriated. 16 years old, fires 3 shots, doesn't hit her, but does hit the window. The glass cuts one of the patrons inside. Paul, how easy is it for these kids to get these guns?
I have been mentoring youth for upwards of 25 plus years. And in my tenure as a mentor and as a professional youth worker, I've never seen the level of access that kids have to guns that are fully automatic, switches, like guns that I don't even see in the hunting magazines. And so it's funny, but it's not, right? And so the question for me is, you can't change the biology of a kid. Adolescents, they're actually supposed to take risks. Their brains develop to take risks. But for me, no one's asking the biggest question. Well, I guess they are, right? How are these guns getting into our communities? How is it easier for one of my young people to get a pistol than it is for him to get a summer job? That's crazy to me. And so, yes, behavior changes. A lot of our programs have CBT, impulse control. We're trying to give them the medicine, but there's only so much we can do. I think a balanced approach of both enforcement of gun trafficking and cut it off, wherever it's coming through, so that they're not as easily available to young people.
So gun violence is down dramatically. How much in the last year or two?
So we have successfully reduced gun violence in King County 2 years in a row. Overall, shots fired are down in all parts of King County. It's down by 55% when you look at 2025 compared to 2024. The end of 2025, though, marked a remarkable 61% reduction in the number of shots fired in South King County. And you wouldn't necessarily know it, but a 61% reduction in the number of juvenile gun crime victims. And that's important. So gun crime's down, we're trending in the right direction, but we still have important work to do. We're not gun crime free yet.
So Captain, your officers, when they're encountering some of these juvenile suspects, many of them have altered those handguns to be fully automatic. And how big of a problem is that right now in our community? Is it the main problem with these guns?
I wouldn't say it's the main problem. It's the loudest problem because it disrupts everything. It disrupts relationships. It disrupts how you walk down the street. People are starting to shelter because they're not comfortable in their own neighborhoods, and that's unacceptable. So I think, there's many solutions. I think that awareness is a huge piece of it. Education's a huge piece of it. On my part, I have to educate my officers, one, to be safe first, two, to be able to read body language, identify. But a big piece of it is creating relationships with these youth so that they can trust you and have discussions with you so that you can guide them in a certain direction or connect them with people like Paul with Urban Family. But the conversations, the networking, the relationships is the big piece of it.
Okay, I'm a proponent of surveillance cameras. There are a lot of people in Seattle who are not. Seattle has been successfully using the Real-Time Crime Center, and I noticed in the case with the pizzeria shooting, the Real-Time Crime Center was able to use some cameras and confirm the car and confirm what the suspect was wearing. So how is the Real-Time Crime Center able to help solve some of these juvenile crimes when detectives, because of the law change, can't interview them without a lawyer present?
Well, the Real-Time Crime Center is basically not only identifying the person, what they're wearing, they're collecting evidence. So, with each camera, each move, each street they're going down, that's intent to get away, right? So the camera in the Real-Time Crime Center is helping us build the cases and make the cases stronger. So all of that information, we wouldn't have that capability, or we don't have enough officers to really go out right now and do that type of work. So the RTCC is really enabling us to bring stronger cases and to actually bring cases to a successful end, which we wouldn't be able to do without that information.
Yeah, there are privacy people that are concerned that it might be invading their privacy. Are the cameras only being used sparingly, or are you sitting in front of the monitors watching them all the time?
So we have a team at RTCC, and their job is to monitor it. So they're not sitting there staring at screens all day, but they're also filtering other information. They have, we have stuff coming in through all kinds of cameras, license plate readers, all of this information. Plus, there's a dedicated comms person in there that's attached to the 911 center, so they're able to send information over as well. They're receiving everything and they're distributing it as necessary. But it's a tool that it's just phenomenal.
Okay.
We're very thankful to have it.
So Lisa, this will be for you, and then I'll do a follow-up with Paul. But the law changed so that detectives cannot interview juvenile suspects without a lawyer present, and not even interview juveniles in a lot of cases. How difficult is that making it to prosecute these cases? Because we have a number of unsolved juvenile homicides right now in King County.
Well, there is a lot of confusion about the law. Like, law enforcement absolutely can talk to juvenile victims. They can talk to juvenile witnesses. There are some parameters around talking to juvenile suspects. We have created a couple of things. One, we have created a video that we are sharing with law enforcement to help explain what the parameters of the law are and what law enforcement can and cannot do. It's been extremely helpful. We also have started a program called J-Watch. It is a closed call where any law enforcement officer in King County can contact our juvenile division, talk to our chief, our deputy chief, and talk about and trade information on crime. And it's been extremely effective and helpful.
Okay. And Paul, how do you encourage people in the community to talk to the police, whether they indirectly give a tip or tell their parents or tell, an older sibling, because that's a big part of this.
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the strengths of preventative and intervention programs is our credible mentors. And so mentors that are able to kind of influence kids. I think it's more opportunities that kids need, especially in the high-risk neighborhoods that we do our work in. We've seen dramatic kind of impact from young people. And when you talk about, young people's rift with or historic rift with the police, it's set in a historical context. I don't want to take it out of that context, but in terms of being, teaching our kids how to respect authority and respect life, I think that's always our goal. And so, but when it comes to this issue, it's a very big issue, but we do it one kid at a time and mentor kids through their difficult issues, help them make better choices.
So we talked to a number of parents after the Rainier Beach shooting, and we were a little surprised. There were many of them that said to us that they want more officers around the schools. We had heard differing opinions, going back several years. Maybe they're not calling for SROs in the schools, but they definitely wanted officers out of their cars, walking patrols. So, Captain Tuttle, is there a discussion about that, having officers closer to the schools, or is this really a non-starter because of the way the school board has said they don't want officers around?
No, I specifically created what I call a 1SAM 91 car. So they're not necessarily answering 911 calls, but their responsibility is to be present in what I call the Rainier Beach corridor. So there's 5 schools there, right? So their responsibility is to be present before the kids even arrive. I expect them to be out of their cars, greeting the kids, talking to the kids. And I expect other district officers, if they're not on calls, to be present in that area as well. And since there are 5 schools, we're talking about a 2-hour period, right? So there's plenty of time to create relationships. There's plenty of time there's no excuses, right? So I feel that is one of the most effective things that we've done so far. And luckily we had just started that the week prior to the unfortunate incident on the 30th, January 30th. So those relationships were already starting. So this has just, like I said, we're honoring these young men by creating even more community, by being out there and being present. And then I have the same program going for the afternoon for the dismissal time. One thing that's pretty amazing about that is Paul, myself, some other violence interrupters that are in the Rainier Beach area, we're working together to make sure we have coverage for the kids. So if I'm not able to have a car out there, I'll call them. I'll say, hey, can you guys get out here at this time? We're also using the CSOs, the community service officers. They're filling in some of the gaps, but we just want to be there 24 hours a day so the kids know that we are present and that we're available.
That's great to hear.
Can I add on to that?
Yes, please.
I think we are also in a good season of partnership. I think the level of partnership, case in point, that incident that happened, law enforcement working with the Seattle Public Schools security, working with the safety specialists and the outreach team, our representatives were at the crime scene. And the overwhelming support from the community was clear. But in particular, I did say there was a rift, but I mean, when you got people that look like you, kind of sound like you, and share similar history, I think it makes a difference. Is that, law enforcement, like, we want to be on the panel of hiring law enforcement to say if they're good for our communities. I've been on a panel to hire law enforcement, particularly in Skyway. I just think we need to do a better job of collaborating so that we can demystify, kind of the stigmas that our past has kind of set us in.
Okay.
Can I add to that?
Yes,
too?
please.
I have to say, I really have to echo the power of partnership. And I also I said this to you earlier, Captain Tuttle, I really admire the work that you're doing with schools. We have a safer school strategy that we launched in the prosecutor's office in 2024 because young people, and even young people who are caught in the legal criminal justice system, they have a right to return to school, and we want them to return to school. We know that kids who get in trouble tend to be like delinquent in terms of school attendance. So we want that person's return to be safe. We want it to be safe for students, for teachers, for educators, for families. And sometimes school officials just do not know how to get information, especially out of our court system. So our office operates as kind of liaisons to help that safe return to school. We know that school is a huge protective factor, and it's having an impact.
What do you think about diversion programs, and where does your office stand on those? It seems there was some criticism of some that maybe if they were working or not working, there really wasn't a lot of data because the kids did not seem to be being tracked as much unless the diversion came through the courts. So where are you right now on diversion programs for kids maybe caught the first time with a gun or caught, they didn't commit a violent crime, but they're headed in that direction?
Well, I have a lot to say on this topic because there's a lot of misunderstanding around it. First, in our state, we have mandatory diversion for most juvenile misdemeanors. And in King County, I am a client of that diversion program. It was called Restorative Community Pathways, and there were community-based nonprofits that offer services to young people, pre-filing diversion, mandatory under our state. We do not divert gun crimes. We just don't do it. It's too dangerous. It's too risky. Those cases are felony cases. And then with regard to data, we track data. We also we found a researcher who for free did an evaluation of the impact of diversion programs. And for RCP in felony, low-level, nonviolent felony referrals, the recidivism rate was at about 50%. And so what we did instead is we paused felony, low-level, nonviolent felony referrals into RCP and instead referred those to diversion by court-run diversion. And we don't have a lot of data on court-run diversion, but this researcher has agreed to come back and take a look at our data, and they're also going to do an evaluation of some Pierce County data so that we have a comparator. So I'm a big believer in diversion for the right cases, absolutely. And we know from Paul's work and from others that it can have a big impact, and it's it's one of the tools in our toolbox.
So, Paul, when I hear people in the community complaining about the catch and release policies, is what they think they are, in juveniles, you can either keep them in custody or you send them home. There is no bail program. Do you find that kids who are kept in jail have a harder time being reformed and getting on the right path? Where do you come down on that, on jailing kids and keeping them in custody?
So this is an interesting topic. We train our staff in what we call the 24-hour clock. 24-hour clock is only 24 hours of the day. 8 hours, hopefully kids are asleep. I know I am. But and then school takes another 8 hours, which leaves you really with 8 hours of intervention. If a kid has 8 hours to do absolutely nothing, they're not doing well in school, they get kicked out. That's 16 hours that you have to figure out what to do with kids. And a lot of this isn't rocket science, right? If you put a kid in a scenario where he has 16 hours to himself with an adolescent brain, you add drugs into the mix, guns, gangs, wrong influence. Mom and dad might be doing the best they can at work. They're at home, left to themselves. How else would they, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're acting like they're aliens, and how did they get like this? Collectively, we made them like that. When we fail them in schools, when we fail to, to give certain sections of our society or communities the right resources, livable wage jobs, so that parents can be home part of the time, that's the real issue to me. It's taking a balanced approach. But when it comes to jail, is there a place for it? Absolutely. I think there is, right? But for young people, if you ask me, I'm biased, because I feel like that young people have and can be incredible assets to their community if they're given the right support systems and the right structures and opportunities, that they will always flourish and do well in those situations. I did have one thing, and I apologize for this, kind of off script. There's an old saying that you should never talk about an issue for people and with people without them. And so we actually invited a young person here that I think, it would be great. We're talking about this generation at some point. It doesn't have to be now, but I would like it to be now. But just to hear what do young people have to say about this topic.
You want to come around up here on the stage behind him?
How's it going? My name is Joshua Wilden. I'm 19 years old. I'm black and native.
Put the mic up just a little bit more, Josh. There you go.
Sorry about that. Here's just one thing that I'm hearing, and especially from like my great mentor here. How do you expect youth to not do gun violence or any type of thing if they're not comfortable? They don't have the opportunities to get to where they need to be. Most of us, and I feel like I could speak on this relatively like straight up, I just got done being homeless. I just got shot a year ago. I went through programs to get to where I am. And the reason I say that is because how do we expect youth to be great, and youth is the future, if we're not given these opportunities, if we're not given, help? It doesn't even have to be just with school, but are we comfortable talking with y'all? Are we comfortable talking with parents? I don't know. I know a year or two ago, I wouldn't be up on this stage. And that's just my question right now. That's all I have to say right now. But
well, let me ask you, what changed so that you were willing to accept help? Getting shot?
I feel like it's leaving people that I love behind, people that have hopes and dreams about me, even though I can't even see it myself. That's what changed like my outlook, because I was put on this planet, and every single one of y'all have put on this planet for a reason. So at the end of the day, I feel like I didn't want to leave that. I didn't want to just be somebody that was known for being shot or being, close to incarceration or being this type of person, because I don't want that. I want my family name to have something, or I want myself to leave something behind, even if it's just the little things.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
Thank you.
Thanks, brother.
So, how much is social media impacting these teens? And I say that because, when we grew up, we had our friends around us. Maybe we knew some kids from another school, but now we got kids from Pierce County, Snohomish County, mixing with, Seattle, Kent, Des Moines, Federal Way. And maybe Captain Tuttle, you can also speak to this, but it seems like every time I read a court doc, there's if it's involved in shooting, whether it's evidence or something, there's social media got involved somehow, whether it's a dispute or something else.
It's a big issue.
Okay.
So much so that we have batted the idea around of online violence interrupters that do their work primarily online, because that's where they're meeting each other in the cross streets of the social media platforms. and they're working themselves up. And you literally see 1,000 YouTubes. They're all the same. Like if a social scientist got their hands on, they probably have. Like they're creating what would normally, in my era, and I've said this before, like it's just me and maybe a few people that saw it. Now that's like the whole city. And then there's this thing called spotlight syndrome, where you think everyone is looking, and to some extent they are, right, as they scroll. But I do think it's something that we should look at in terms of the research and the data, and have both our social scientists as well as our practitioners create tools for all of us to figure out how do we prevent it, how do we intervene, and then what are the repercussions when it's gone too far, so.
Yeah. So there are groups that have territories, but then there also, somebody offends them, they're willing to drive down or drive around. I've seen videos where they're driving around waving the guns out of the car, and just escalating situations. But Captain Tuttle, do you think, though, that these teens that you're interacting with, your officers are interacting with on the street, do you think they understand that, or are their brains not formed enough to see that the social media is not real life, and that personal relationships are much better? Just trying to be more positive. And I don't mean like the good kids, but the kids who are maybe the tougher ones to have a conversation with.
I don't like to blanket answers, so I really don't want to say yes and no on that. It depends on the child. It depends on their upbringing, depends on their influences. Personally, my children had their heads in the phone for a while, but then they reached a certain age where like, and they just stopped. And I don't know that a lot of kids do that, because it is such a big part of our lives now. It's where you get your information. It's where you're, contacting other people and sending messages. It's everything for some people. But I don't like to blanket that is,
Sure.
is the reason, so.
Yeah. Well, it also turns out to be some of the best evidence detectives get in a lot of cases when these kids involved in some of this negative behavior are bragging about it online. So, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword, I guess, Leesa. A little bit. I mean, you guys use, when I look through a lot of the charging documents, there is almost always stuff in there from their Snapchat or from their Instagram or from their TikTok.
Well, I think we can all agree, like social media is here to stay, and it does show up as in evidence in a lot of our cases, both juvenile and adult. I mean, just because people are online and they say things.
Yeah.
So, right. And they do things, right.
Yeah. Well, and that evidence is useful because if they can't interview somebody and ask them what happened at the scene, they have to figure out another way. I think what I'm asking is, how difficult is it to prosecute these juvenile homicides now as opposed to 5 years ago?
Well, I think that every case presents its own challenges, right? So I don't know that cases are necessarily more difficult now than they were 5 years ago. I think what we're seeing is the amount of evidence that can be presented, that our prosecutors, the detectives, that our public records folks have to go through can be voluminous. But in terms of like the elements of the crime and establishing and presenting in court the evidence of every element, I mean, that basic act is still the same.
Okay. So there is hope that some of these families will get some justice, I guess. It just may take a little longer for that to happen, to be able to develop all the evidence.
Well, in our office, we just implemented a policy and we've proven to ourselves that we can do it. So we are now an office that makes our adult felony and juvenile filing decisions within 30 days of law enforcement referral. It is more victim-centered. It is better for individuals who are accused because they aren't waiting sometimes months or years to find out if charges will be brought. And it's better for law enforcement because it keeps them engaged in the investigation, and it also shows them in a more timely way the impact of their good work. So
okay. Yeah. So we will have a chance, I think, after the break for you to ask some questions. And do you want to take that break now? Yeah. Okay. So let's take a break, and we'll be back, 15 minutes? 10. That's 10 minutes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I want to talk a little about, he and I were talking about the Real-Time Crime Center because that is a hot button issue right now in Seattle with surveillance. And if you could just clarify a little bit about how that crime center works and how it's monitored and what you guys are looking at and how it's helping or the concerns anybody might have.
Yeah, absolutely. And what Heidi Tuttle said is correct. We have a team that works up in the real-time crime center. The one point of clarity I want to make on that is that they are not actively surveilling or watching cameras for something to happen. What they're doing is responding when we get the report of a crime, something to investigate. That has to be a crime that's occurring in Seattle, in one of the areas that has coverage with the cameras. At that point, they're going to look into the feed that's retained for a period of 5 days. That's something that only we're using internally in the Seattle Police Department. We don't have other entities, other enforcement agencies, federal, state, or local making requests. We're not taking any requests like that. We're not providing information to other agencies. It has to have a Seattle crime nexus, and then we're looking back in the video up to 5 days, like I said, and after that, it's no longer retained.
Okay, and can you guys address the investigation that's going on and share at least maybe what detectives have told you with the Rainier Beach shooting or any of the other ones? But that's the most recent one and the one that has been, of course, shocking to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And here I'm going to hand the microphone over to Lieutenant Sean Moore. He's with our Investigations Bureau and can address that.
And he's the boss of homicide, robbery, homicide?
I am not the boss of homicide. I'll just let you know. So I am the lieutenant for robbery and for the gun violence reduction unit.
I actually knew that. I'm just kind of putting him on the spot.
Lieutenant Verhoff heads homicide, and the violent crime section, which is headed by Captain Martin Rivera, also includes CSI. So those are the 4 units that are in violent crimes. I have 2 of them, and they're separated through the other captain or the other lieutenants. So when I talk to the detective that is responsible for this case, I asked them about this case, and they're not at the point where they have probable cause to make an arrest yet, but they're deep into it. They're getting very close. However, if they had probable cause for a suspect, they would immediately make a plan and go arrest that person. So we're still trying to establish probable cause to arrest the person responsible for that crime.
Okay, this may be, you may be able to answer it or maybe not, but as with all the attention on this, has the community been helpful in helping you?
Yes. I could tell everybody, or tell anybody that would listen, the most important thing that we can get from the community is to know that we are your police department, and we can't do a lot of things without your support. So the majority of the crimes that are solved from tips or from somebody coming forward and telling us something. So when you look at the crime itself, it's a big jigsaw puzzle that a detective has to put together in the end. And ultimately, one person may call and say, I saw a white car after this shooting. It's just a white car. There are a lot of white cars driving around right now. Another person will come and say, I saw a white Subaru right there right before the shooting. And then somebody else will come, I saw a license plate, but I only got CWU out of it. And then eventually you put all of those pieces together of the jigsaw puzzle, and that's how ultimately the investigation will go. And that works for gun violence, for shootings, for assault 1, for homicides, and for robberies as well.
And how's morale at SPD? It's been a rough couple of years, I think. New leadership, and got a lot of detectives moved into detective positions, I would imagine. But people embracing the job and feeling good about things and eager to come to work every day?
I would say absolutely yes. What I can tell you, I can only speak for myself, but I can tell you that the professionals that I have in the Investigations Bureau are dedicated professionals that love this city, that give their basically hours away from their own family to come here to solve violent crimes.
Okay, if you could, go ahead.
On to that question? Yeah, so I'm over the Patrol Operations Bureau, and the metric that I would say most reflects the fact that morale is very good right now is that we've had a 16% increase in proactive on-view activity and enforcement by our Seattle police officers on the streets this past year. That means that they're not just responding to their calls for service, but in between those calls looking for active opportunities to take enforcement, to engage with the public, to uphold law and order. So yes, it's very good right now. It's improved.
That's good to hear. And the reason I ask that is anybody who comes in contact with law enforcement, whether it's something small, you got your car broken into, somebody kicked your dog, whatever it is, the officers that respond to that, how they treat you, how they respect you or don't respect you, that's very important. And we don't know what those officers have seen before they came to us. They may have seen a dead kid, in some horrific act, and then the next call is ours. So we don't actually know what that is. But with their mental health and their balance and keeping their enthusiasm up, it helps with their relationship with the community, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. And one of the things that we have done is we have a very robust wellness unit that works with, ensuring the mental well-being of the officers, and not just following a critical or response like an officer-involved shooting, but just for those, like you talked about, those calls that kind of leave a mark, like you don't forget it easily. They're actively engaging, reaching out, and ensuring that the services that are requested, that are appropriate, that the officers agree to, are being provided, that they're readily accessible.
Okay, that's good to hear, for sure.
Yeah, and I see that Heidi would like to.
I'm just going to add to that because I can speak for my precinct specifically. There are times, but it's our responsibility as supervisors to keep an eye on our officers. If there's some officers that are having a down day or something just doesn't feel right, I'll pull them off the street and be like, hey, come into my office, which is set up like a living room, I will tell you. Come in, sit down, and let's just chit chat. We also have in-house mental health therapists that are there once a week. We have a precinct dog. Sorry, but we have a precinct dog. Back to he's getting a little uniform. But I do everything I can. I do everything I can really to make sure I'm overly motherly. I already know that. But I want to make sure that my officers are healthy and joyful before they walk out that door. Because you just can't give good service unless you're joyful inside. So I've been known to run around the precinct, throwing sparkles, throwing toys, throwing candy, whatever it is, just to make yourself in a good space before you leave my doors.
Please come through Fox 13 anytime. bring some
I am
joy.
definitely the joy police.
That
I
would
will
be
give you
great.
that.
Okay, I've asked enough questions, but let's get some questions from some of you who may have some more direct answers that you'd like to get.
Go ahead and come down here and line up right behind me, and we'll take your questions. And you can ask questions while people listen.
Oh, okay, yeah. Don't be shy.
Josh, I know you might have a question. I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you want to be the first question? I saw you writing some down. Come on up.
Yeah, I have a few. Thank you. I feel like here's a question that has been like on my mind recently, especially hearing all of you, is like how do they get their weapons and things of this nature, but it's why. Like what's going on at home in their communities, or what's going on, it's not like, and I feel like I've learned this in a few books, is like people tend to put on three faces, and not many of us have seen all three from people in general. So I feel like at the end of the day, we never know what's going on at home. And I know this is like a multi-step question, but this is something that I've been just wondering, like, how are we making sure that our youth is happy?
Yeah, Paul, I think that's a question for you.
That's a great question. And I think, we kind of talked about it, right? It's not just one organization or institution that cares for our young people. When we talk about the 24-hour clock, it's literally all of us are impacted by gun violence, and the same can be said about support needs to come from, it needs to be a community response. Obviously starting with the family, which is very important. But what we had talked about is what helped Josh and what helps many other young people kind of get back on course is caring adult relationships in the form of programs. These programs act like an extended family. They're kind of aunties and uncles in the work. We've coined the phrase "cousins in the work" with other organizations that we work closely with. I did want to give a shout out. I don't know if he's still here though, but Garrett from Council Member Lynn's office. Clap it up for Garrett. He was one of the council members that was on the scene with our violence interrupters. And I thought it was unusual to have him, Hollingsworth. Also, King County Office of Gun Violence, Deontay Damper's here. Clap it up for Deontay Damper. It really takes all of us kind of doing our part for young people and their families. It's not just young people. We should be about livable wage jobs for their parents, giving them, access to education and health care and all of the basic needs that people need to survive. And so when you talk about how do you be there for young people, you can't talk about that without addressing basic needs, caring adult relationships. I'm going to come back to that over and over again. This is, in fact, a caring adult relationship in the form of law enforcement, right? Same here. These two happen to be, the same kind of, court systems. She's a caring adult, probably has a family that lives near or in the same communities. These are forms of, of what it takes. And obviously, how many youth-serving organizations do we have in the building here? Raise your hands. These are professionals. These are uncles and aunties and cousins in the work. Like, it takes all of us. And so I think it's important that we not pin it on one or two organizations or even institutions, but, the collective wisdom of the group and being able to, that we're sustainable. We love hearing that you guys have a budget for wellness. Our interrupters, we don't, right? And so we have to have peace circles as part of our therapy, that we have. And so, I mean, we want that, right? We're happy for our law enforcement partners, but we see the same horrific things. It was one of our violence interrupters that made the call to activate the team, and he's standing in front of one of his students that was murdered. And so, yes, we gave him a week off, but those things, they don't just leave easily. And so I think wellness and mental health resources are extremely important, especially for the people that are on the front lines doing this work.
So these juveniles that turn out to be shooters, you can't paint a broad brush and say, well, they're not in school or they are in school, but those people who are living a very risky lifestyle, how do you reach them? How do you get into their life if they're not really looking for a mentor? Are you still able to make an impact?
Every kid searches for belonging. The gang is just another remix of a broken family system. But at their core, they're all the same. I've been doing this, my wife and I have been doing this for upwards of 30 years. They have something in them that wants to belong to something that loves them, that cares for them, that provides for them, that teaches them. And so if you are left up to a gang that is, and I'll say this, whoever spends the most time with your kids wins, whatever that looks like. And so if the big homie on the block, the gang member on the block spends more time with your kid, 9 times out of 10, he's gonna have the biggest influence on that kid. But if it's coaches, we just talked about, we just went through a whole group of caring adults. The reason why he's here, right? It was mentors, it was coaches, right? Pastors, it was different people. And I think that, we all kind of do a good job of doing our thing by ourselves, but I think this time necessitates leaders that are willing to center their humanity, their story, and more importantly, how to work together. And that's including our politicians. One of the things I thought, and I'll end with this, was different about some of our politicians is that they're actually centering the will of the people instead of their own political agenda. Not all of them, definitely not all of them, but the ones that I think people need in this era is people that really want to be for the people and give us something that we can be proud of in terms of elected officials. So,
All right, thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi. It was mentioned earlier that law enforcement frequently engages with underage young people who are illegally carrying firearms. My question is, and that they have to, this has to happen multiple times, usually, before there's any meaningful action. What happens to those firearms?
They're collected for evidence. We use them for the prosecution, and ultimately they're destroyed.
And where are those firearms coming from? They're coming from car prowls, burglaries? Where are they?
They can come from multiple sources. They're not getting them legally. It's not like we're not finding kids that are going down and purchasing firearms from the Big Five or from a sporting goods place. So they're usually gotten illegally, and sometimes they're passed around among groups of kids. That's one of our concerns.
And do you find that some people don't report their firearms stolen, and how big of an issue is that?
I couldn't really speak to that. I'm not really the burglary unit and other units are responsible for guns that are stolen in that manner. Most of the time, we are finding firearms that were gotten illegally or illicitly, however you want to describe it, but they're not getting them legally. I know that much.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Garrett Plesko-Moore. I work for Councilmember Eddie Lynn, and I'm hearing Paul highlight how it's easier for kids to access guns and jobs at times. And so I'm curious, Prosecutor, I hear you've been working on a pilot project to extend extreme risk protection orders to households of families where kids are having too easy access to guns. Can you share a little bit more how that's going?
Sure. It is a pilot project that we launched in July of last year. And, you know, the way extreme risk protection orders work, law enforcement file a petition because there is someone who has access to a firearm that is a harm to self or others. And for juveniles who carry firearms, I mean, they're a harm for self or others, right? We launched it in July, and in July of that year, we had like 3 referrals, but then by September, we had 9 because it just took a little while for law enforcement to know that we were doing this and that we were serious about it. And I will tell you, we don't have tons of cases, and that's for 2 reasons. One, I don't have the resources I need to make that as robust as I would like. As part of my 26-27 budget request, I asked for a Safer Schools dedicated person so that we can bring those efforts to every school in King County. I also asked for someone to work on juvenile ERPOs, an attorney, because we need to have an attorney go to court and to convince a judge to sign the order. I was given one body to do both of those bodies of work, and they aren't the same type of work. They're not even housed in the same location. So I've invested that body of work in Safer Schools because it's having a really big preventative impact. So if I had a body, could I grow it? Could I get the word out to law enforcement in a more robust way? Absolutely. Do I think it's worth exploring and expanding? Absolutely. Every extreme risk protection order saves lives.
Is there a program in another nearby city that is not being done in Seattle that you're finding is helping address gun violence in teens?
You know, I hear a lot about some models on the East Coast. People talk about Baltimore, they talk about Chicago, they talk about Boston. And I will say the thing that I notice is that the investment really matters. And the way that I like to explain this to folks who ask is, if I invest $1.99 and I get a 100% return on investment, I get like $3.99. I can't even buy a cup of coffee. So I'm not going to have the impact that I want. And some of those East Coast programs really invest in street level interruption on kind of 3 levels: street level, family, and then kind of the reoccurring, how do we make sure that all of those important lessons stick. They also invest in their police and their prosecutors to work together. And so when I'm trying to solve gun violence and I get one body to do 2 really important bodies of work, I think we can talk about like return on investment and how successful that might be.
And funding is an issue for all the groups that are. I mean, there's a number of groups that want to help, but these are not funded by the.
Right.
Maybe you get some money from King County, but you're also probably having to raise money.
Absolutely, and that there are models that work in Chicago, certainly DC. There are different models that we have kind of flown out to, and Roca and Baltimore. But she's right. It's the investment, but I think the question should be, well, if you're not investing in that, then where are the funds going to, right? Because there's actually a cost for violence. There was a study done by, I always get their name wrong, but they're Nick Jr. They're basically, Nick Jr.'s it's the acronym, so I apologize. But they basically did a study on the cost for one act of gun violence. that, because if you think about it, right, just from a arbitrary, I know nothing about this, so gun victim, right? That triggers law enforcement services. That triggers social services. That triggers court services. And so there are all these fees that are paid to figure out that one gunshot victim, and millions of dollars that go to that thing, and that prevention is only a fraction of the cost, but no one's looking at that because you literally have a whole, millions of dollars going to respond reactively to that instead of getting upstream. Do you need that? Absolutely. But someone needs to figure out how we get on the preventative end and upstream to figure out how do we get to kids and give them opportunities to where they're like, no, I got a game tomorrow. Or things that every kid should want, Yeah. And so the funding piece is extremely important of what's invested in. And I'll end with this: workforce development. Being able to get kids funds. We pay kids to be a part of a workforce development 6 weeks. In that 6 weeks, those same kids that are normally court involved, they got the ankle monitor, we get all of the permissions, 0 incidents for those kids in that 6 week period. It's because not only are they're earning a wage, they're learning CBT. We had kids that other folks would look at as gangsters. They were doing yoga, meditating. And it was like these same kids that everyone is like demonizes, and these same kids given the opportunity and the right environment and a caring adult and well-resourced. These kids are just like everyone else's kids. Yeah. They want an opportunity to thrive.
Sounds like we need Gurmai Zahalai at the next meeting that we have here to talk about funding. You have a question?
Oh, I'll hold it. Okay. Hi, my name is Tiffany Attrell. I am a former crime victim advocate. I was first in SPD for many years and then with the prosecutor's office. I am here to ask, in June of 2025 was the first ever Crime Victim Survivor Summit, and we learned a lot from a panel of crime survivors as they spoke so bravely about their experiences. We learned about tremendous service gaps, including financial service gap. I'm glad we're talking about budgets because it was shown that 14% of King County budget in criminal justice went to victims, with 86% going to offender-focused programs. And so my question is, Leesa, in your office, what do you think about that percentage disparity? And also, what is your office doing to prioritize the importance of crime victims and hearing their voices and the needs that are needed?
Sure. Hi, Tiffany. Good to see you. And thank you so much for all your hard work for all those years. Yeah. In the 26-27 budget, I fought for 16 victim advocate positions because victims have both constitutional and statutory rights in our state, and collectively we must do a better job to honor them. Of those 16 positions I requested, I received 8. And the funding for those positions starts in July 1 of this year. The one big thing that I am doing, and we have just launched this work, is to really not only increase the number of victim advocates, but really to bring an intentional focus on healing. There is nothing magical about the resolution of a case that resolves someone's trauma or harm or lessens it. And, at that Crime Victim Summit, I remember hearing one of the victim panelists say, I have lost a loved one. I have a life sentence. And what we need to do is help that victim heal, because separate and apart from the resolution of the case, no matter how much punishment we bring, that person's loved one's not coming back. So how do we help them recover? How do we help them have services? How do we help them have access to mental health services for as long as they need them? So I'm very interested in supporting that work. Yeah, victim service is extremely important.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi. My name is Nika. I'm with Choose 180. And first, just thanks so much for holding the space. This is really critical work and really loving the conversation. With that being said, though, Paul, you mentioned earlier about balancing, right? And so that's been on my mind noodling. And so I have a question, I wrote it down, but we heard the point about balancing accountability with support for young people. Paul, you mentioned that earlier. So from the perspective of law enforcement and prosecution, I'm curious, when you think about that balance, what does it look like in practice when you're responding to youth-involved violence?
Sure. Hi. And just so you know, it's good to see you. And for folks who don't know, Choose 180 has a very, very special place in my heart. So I remember when it was like a dream, and the 180 program, and it's come a long way. For me, I talk often about the two-prong approach, and balance can look like a lot of things. But one, it looks like this. Like, there are individuals who are creating harm in our community. And, for example, I've said, if you're committing an assault one with a firearm in our community, we're going to prosecute you. So our job is to bring accountability, but we can be responsible about that. I don't have to charge every single firearm enhancement, which carries a 5-year mandatory minimum. I can charge 1 instead of 6. That, to me, is balance. And also, it is prosecutors being very thoughtful about the power that we hold. I also believe that there are people who are close to gun violence. They haven't yet become victims or perpetrators of harm. We shouldn't wait to see what the research and the statistics show us what will happen. We need to get those folks supports so that we can keep them out of our system. And it is things like, do they have jobs? Do they have places to go? Do they have a way to engage in something that is creative and meaningful? Do they have caring adults and caring people in their lives? Have they found their peer group? Have they found their tribe? To me, all of that works together. That is balance.
Hello.
Good evening. My name is Cesar Garcia. I'm part of the Lake City Collective. We were the first collective in Seattle, although this is a nice place. Also I'm here with some peers, my peers from Leadership Tomorrow. The question is about, is there anybody from Seattle Public Schools here today?
No.
No? I believe, our kids, I have 3 kids, I believe they need to be here, and they need to be part of this conversation in terms of the path forward and the prevention. Our organizations, community-based organizations, we do a lot of work on prevention, which is undervalued, but we don't see them 5-6 hours a day. Seattle Public Schools have our kids 5, 6, 7 hours a day. In our community, the kids, they don't even want to use the restroom because they don't feel safe. So I would like to know, and it's also a question that comes from our group, what is Seattle Public Schools doing with the teachers at school so kids feel that they belong and they feel safe? So I would like to hear more. Thank you.
Well, I can't speak for Seattle Public Schools directly, but I can speak as a partner of Seattle Public Schools. And also alumni of Rainier Beach, and then my sister, my oldest sister, is the principal of Rainier Beach High School. And so what I can say is that the city of Seattle, as well as SPS, is making an investment in safety, particularly for targeted schools that have a history of violence in the neighborhood. And so both inside campus work as well as the intervention, safe passage routes in coordination with and partnership with law enforcement to make sure that the very basic elements of safety are at play at these targeted schools. And so Rainier Beach has been very responsive with the loss of the 2 students there. They hosted a student-led kind of memorial service that they were able to kind of express their fear of feeling safe while also losing a peer. So they also have healing circles. So I would say a considerable amount that most of the public doesn't know about that SPS is proactively working on solutions in partnership with community-based organizations and law enforcement, et cetera, and the city of Seattle.
Good evening, everyone. I would ask this question within my position under the King County Regional Office of Gun Violence, but I actually come to you as a young boy who lived in the south end of Seattle, right? The real issue that I felt when I seen those two boys get shot was this has been a 50-year issue in the same area. And we can talk about youth violence, but this has been generational violence that has impacted this community for years, right? And this also goes to you, David. This goes for everybody on the stage. What is your commitment for the area of Rainier Beach? What do you plan on doing, actionary, to be a part of that ecosystem? Because what I always see online constantly is everyone writes out what their thoughts are, their hopes are. They jump in a prayer circle with the kids for a month and then they're gone, right? And how much that triggers those young boys and those young girls, right? When I was sitting there with these kids over the past month, I was triggered because the only thing I wanted to make sure that that didn't happen was they didn't have a soft place to land. So my question to everybody on stage, right? Because this is a great event here. Would have been better if it was in Rainier Beach, but still. But what is your commitment to making it a safe and thriving Rainier Beach? Everybody. Okay.
Thank you for your question. My commitment is, as long as I'm not moved out of my precinct, my commitment is to be as involved as I possibly can every single day. My kids are grown, I got time, I want to just be present, so that's very important for me. But also it's to mentor the young officers, and I think since 2020 there's been a wall up, right? It's been an us and them. So that is starting to break down. And now that we have new officers coming into the precinct, it's about training them about how joyful and important this job can be. So that's my responsibility. Additionally, it's being curious and being vulnerable. Those are the two things that have to go together in order to learn, expand, and work in partnership. Because otherwise, it's never going to change. And I think right now, since we have this incredible opportunity to love these two young men and work together in partnership, there has never been a better time in my 29 years that I've ever seen that we've been working this closely. We've always worked together well, but this is a whole nother level of relationship building and support of each other, in my opinion.
You know, you're right. I can go back 18 years. I've sat with a lot of families in that neighborhood. Some got justice, some didn't. I can commit to doing more positive stories on the work's being done and not just coming in and covering the crime. Talking about, thank you. Because there's great stuff going on here that we don't know about in the news media. And part of that is because we're covering the breaking thing. Where's the next thing? Where's the next thing? But there are amazing stories like this young man. Where'd he go? There you are. Just right in front of me. My apologies. That need to be told. People need to hear that so they don't just hear about the shooting, another shooting in Rainier Beach, to show that there are positive people in the community that other people can look up to. And I think that I always say that you never know how much you're going to affect even one or two people every time you do a story. And if you can just do that and make it a commitment, and I'll make that commitment to you, you keep giving me good ideas, I'll do good stories. And maybe that'll help balance out some of the negativity and show how hard the community's working so that people are involved in this. I'm not going to say they're embarrassed, but maybe they think twice. And maybe they want to be part of something good instead of something bad. Okay? All right.
Okay, so I'm going to continue to defend diversion in the right cases because we know that diversion works. We know from the data, we know from juvenile adolescent brain development research, we know from outcomes. So I will continue to defend that because sometimes it gets attacked, but it works. I will continue to partner with law enforcement to identify the individuals who are causing harm in our community. And I just learned today that in the city of Seattle, it is 0.001% of our city population that is tied to 52% of our gun violence in the city of Seattle. So if we can inoculate that very small number of people, we will reduce gun violence by 52%. So I will continue to be a good partner to law enforcement. We're going to continue on the important work of helping victims heal so we can help heal and end some of that generational trauma. And then also, I am really encouraged by the work that we are doing with the Kent Police Department, Project Be Free, and Latino Civic Alliance that are providing services to young people that are close to gun violence. And that partnership between community, law enforcement, and prosecutor's office is having an impact. That's why shots fired in South King County is down 61% when the rest of the county is at 55%. So, and I'll continue to be really honest about the need for our community, because we have to make the right investments to have the impact that we want and the return on investment that we need.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you for putting us on the spot, too.
I just have one more question, and I feel like this is for you, Captain. I just wanted to like touch on what you said. Is like, how do you help youth be vulnerable? Like, yeah, like how do you like help them be vulnerable in speaking up to law enforcement?
I think a huge piece of it is being present, repeatedly present, not just get out of the car once and touch somebody and be done. I think that's ridiculous. It's the multiple contacts, even just starting with the wave. I always pride myself on putting myself into places that a lot of people don't want me in till they like me. I'm gonna make them like me. Some of these people can attest to that. But to me, it's being present, and it's being constant and consistent, and then being open. You know, I'm not there just when things are bad. I'm there when things are good.
Here's a +2 to this question too. How do you go about it when most youth or people that are doing the violence, how are you gonna get them out of, like, what's the word? The cycle. Yeah. How is that gonna work? Like, cause most, like, based on like years of police and history, how do you get people out of fearing to accepting?
I think sometimes you have to work by proxy, right, with other people. So I have my ally here. He might have a better voice communicating with the youth, and maybe in partnership, I stand next to him while he's starting that conversation. And then eventually I can take over the conversation. But a lot of people don't respond just to a police officer walking into the room, right? I mean, sometimes if I'm off duty and I'm at home out in public, and I see a police officer or a police officer's driving behind me, my tummy still hurts. And I've been doing this forever. But it's getting over the fear. It's being present, being there not only during bad times, but just being constantly there, whether people like it or not. So,
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
That's definitely
absolutely.
So my name is Aaron. I'm the Director of Policy and External Affairs at a nonprofit called Building Changes, which actually works very closely with your sister, Principal Patu. And we do a lot of work around children and family homelessness. And one of the things that we've learned, very clearly is that the only way we're going to be able to tackle problems like youth violence or homelessness is if we're actually having the voices who are affected the most participate in the decision making. And so, the other side of that is, part of it is affecting the system levers, and then the other part of it is the culture levers. And so what I would ask of all of you is, how are you incorporating youth voice in the actual decision making that your offices are doing, because they're the ones who have the skin in the game more than any of us. So,
I'll take a first crack at that, because one of the things that I talk a lot about in the office is the distinction between input and decision making. The input really matters, but sometimes it's not appropriate for outside voices to wield the power of the prosecutor. And that's not because I'm trying to hog power, it's because I'm accountable to that. That's what I was elected to do. But do I care about how my decisions impact our community? If there is something that I'm missing or something that I could do better, I absolutely want to hear that input. And I say that not just on my decisions that are facing outward to the office, but it's also on my decisions facing inward in the office. We had a conversation today, and it was about whether someone who had been convicted of a crime a very long time ago, served their entire prison sentence, but wanted to get clemency and was denied. Would we be willing to reclassify that person's charged for something else for immigration purposes, to keep that person immigration safe. And that was an area where we had a lot of input, but the decision was mine. So input, decision making, both work hand in hand, but I just think it's important to be clear about which is appropriate where.
I know for Urban Family, one of our values is youth voice. And so there's a training on youth and adult partnerships that we offer. And oftentimes it's, pendulum swings either all youth voice or all adult voices. And so I think teaching balance and where it's appropriate, like you were saying, but really kind of centering the saying I said earlier. It actually comes from Burundi's rights, that you do for us, without us, you do to us. And so it's always important that the victims can center their own stories and speak on behalf of themselves. And so I think it's very important. But our organization, we're tilted in that direction. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then the follow-up I had was, you mentioned social media before, and I will just say, I'm 29 years old. Social media has been a thing. I don't know why we're still talking about it. The real conversation, or the real question for me, is AI. And recently, the legislature just failed to pass a bill that would regulate data centers. And King County is kind of the beating heart of tech in Washington. So I would ask also, how are we thinking ahead in that prevention mindset about the next wave of generative conflict, and has there been any thought given to how to ebb that wave before it comes?
I think Leesa can address that best.
I haven't thought about generative conflict in the AI situation. The way that I've been thinking about AI is like AI-generated police reports, which we do not accept. I mean, I'm thinking about it that way. We also today just learned that a bill passed the legislature that closed an important loophole in laws that protect children against sexual exploitation and depictions of abuse of children. There was a gap in the law that AI-generated images of children being abused were not, we could not prosecute them. That bill that today passed and closes that loop. So that's how I've been thinking about AI. I haven't been thinking about what happens when there's like fake AI conflict between two people that kind of introduce a reason for them to beef with one another.
We're going to take our last question here, but stick around. We're going to, break up after this.
Hi, I'm Dave Sylvester. I kind of have a question kind of for all y'all. I guess the first one would be, you just spoke about kind of the gun violence and everything, but my thing is kind of Seattle's kind of divided as far as law enforcement, and I don't know how we can move forward. If some of us feel that we should defund you, while others feel like we should support you. And I think that's counteractive to the degree to making the work well. That's the one piece. So how do we build that relationship with SPD to be able for people to come forward, as well as just kind of have that harmonious relationship? But then for you, Paul, I wonder, a lot of things that happen usually due to emotional regulation. People don't know how to communicate, solve their issues and things. And my experiences in homelessness, specifically homeless youth, for the last 10 years. And emotional regulation is a big thing. And there's not a lot of work or money put into that prevention of the life skills of emotional regulation. And I know all y'all probably can't answer that, but I think it still fits in the realm of law enforcement, because without that, they see you. So how do we enforce that as a prevention already into the model? Because it should start young, how to regulate your emotions and things like that. And the prosecuting attorney, his office can do that as well. Anybody can be a part of that, the community as well. How do we move forward in that? So I guess it's a two-part question in that way.
Can you ask the question again?
I think what he's asking, I know what you're asking about. You're
kind of layered.
So
but,
that's the whole defund Seattle Police is fake news. They didn't defund Seattle Police. I know, but everybody thinks they did, right? And so then they're like, well, why should we even help Seattle Police? There's people, they all left, right? They don't have enough people there. And I was just talking to Barbara about this. I'd like to change that narrative because I know these detectives and officers. I know them personally. I know how hard they work and how much they care. But there is a general consensus or a feeling out there, and that's why I asked about their emotional state and how they are in relating to people in the community, no matter what their contact is, because it's important, and that's how you build the better relationship. So I do understand what you're saying, but I think we have to highlight more of the successes and the work being done that nobody's hearing about, including me and our audience, because it is going on all the time, because most of us are doing doom scrolling stories. If you look on my Facebook page, David Rose Fox 13, you're not going to see any happy stories. Every story is going to be something else that's going to make you, oh my God, oh my God, everything, right? Because that's what I tend to cover. It's very seldom for me to cover some happy story about positive things that are happening in the community. That's why I said that maybe we need to do more of that. They don't get the shares, but people will see them. And so I do think that you're right, it is a community divided. And the louder voices sometimes take over, especially on social media. They take over the conversation, and they're a smaller part of our community.
So Urban Family would like to be your first positive story. Right here, get them on film, get them on film. Yes. And we have a lot to say. Yeah. About very important topics. However, we were part of a leadership fellowship, where the premise, thought leader by the name of Ben McBride introduced the topic of radical belonging. And part of radical belonging is being able to bridge difference with people that are quote unquote other than you. I think that we should lean in to whatever the other is, but not start off with conflict, but start off with stories. I think we can all agree that if we told our stories here on this stage, we probably have a lot in common. And so part of that is curating conversations. Thank you, the CityClub, for curating this conversation. How else are does this get out there except for someone says, you know what, let's hold space, let's curate a conversation about youth violence. And somewhere in that process, our imaginations are sparked, right? I think we need more curated conversations with folks that are seemingly the other. In a divisive time, we actually need mechanisms that bring us together and leaders that bring us together.
Yeah. Amen. For sure.
So I'm going to dream a little bit to the answer to your question. So if I could wave a magic wand, we would have in every single class, in every single school in the United States, a counselor. And it starts when you're 5 years old. It's just routine. You go spend your 15 minutes, your 30 minutes with the counselor every week, and you talk about your feelings, and you talk about what's going on in the classroom, because we normalize that behavior, and we make the investment necessary to build those skills. And not just in children, but it's so much easier when we start with children. But I know plenty of adults who need that kind of support and that kind of help too. Let's if I could wave a magic wand. So that's not really an answer, but it is a dream. All right.
All right. Thank you all for participating tonight, for being here. Please thank our panel for showing up and answering all these questions.